Hey, what's up, guys? Sorry about not commenting back to the comments. I'll mention a couple of them here. I can't really do that at the moment in terms of like commenting, but I know there's some like longtime subscribers that are saying what's up. So hi to you guys as well. There are people talking about asking me where I'm at. I'm in Georgia, the country, in the Caucasus. My mother's side of the family comes from there. Um, and I'm trying to basically kind of make this my home base for now, so we'll see how that goes. I did have to leave the U.S. for personal reasons, which I've mentioned. Um, I could go back to the U.S. as well. It's an option, but for now, the goal is to make it here, which is one of the reasons why I'm finally coming out with content again. I want to switch my pursuit to something more creative, something more near and dear to my heart, whereas the business I had in the U.S., being in the construction and service industry, was good. It was a good experience, but I ultimately did kind of lose touch in some ways with my other goals. So anyways, in this video, I want to talk a little bit about one of the subject matters that's near and dear to this channel, notably intimacy, relationships, sexuality, compulsive behavior, addiction. It's something I have a lot of thoughts on, where like one of the reasons being that I just used to be heavily drawn into the pickup, no fap, all this kind of stuff. And I have some nuanced takes on it now that I want to share. And the first thing too I want to share is that there is a new forum now. If you go to navigatingdionysus.com/forum, you can also go to navigatingdionysus.com. You'll see the forum button on there, and I purchased the license to use the software that a lot of the old school forums in dating, seduction, and nofap, the actual mainstream nofap forum that's still out right now, uses the same software that I've used to build mine. And the cool thing about this forum is, one of the cool things is that it's not censored, right? It's not going to be there's no one's going to really remove stuff based on bullshit policies on what you can and can't say, unless of course you say something crazy, and I might personally remove it. But other than that, it's a forum where men can really just talk about relationships and intimacy, women, family life, all this kind of stuff. And I think there's really no forums that really go into that for men that are not, also religious or something like that, or heavily regulated. I think the NoFap forum itself was on Reddit at one point, and it got like completely censored. And there's just a lot of stuff like that, particularly in any subject matter related to like men's self-help or whatever you want to call it. Especially game, seduction, all that kind of stuff. So this is the first, I think, forum that I know anyway, where you can really talk about relationships, present your specific problems, and talk to guys that are also familiar with concepts around like semen retention, creating long-lasting intimacy within relationships, and not just, again, it's kind of like beyond pickup, beyond nofap. It's sort of the next level stuff, but also the basics as well on those topics. So once again, navigatingdionysus.com/forum. There's only a handful of members at the moment, so let's just do me a favor and just join the forum. And you don't have to post anything, but let's populate it a bit so that it's more inviting. And eventually, I've seeded the forum as well with a few posts and stuff. So anything from men's style to making money, but also intimacy, relationships, fitness, martial arts. It's basically a gathering of men. I probably didn't do it justice in the beginning of this video making it sound like it's just about intimacy and all that, but it's not. It's about everything pertaining to just living life as a man. It's kind of what we all want, Men's Health and all these kind of like magazines to be about, but it's a discussion forum where, again, there isn't some like HR lady that's going to kick you off for saying something a little bit uncouth. So check it out. You can also track progress, find accountability on there for like your goals, whether it's abstinence from porn addiction, all that kind of stuff. Wanted to just talk a little bit too about like NoFap. I mentioned in one of my videos that there's an argument for not engaging in that kind of practice too much. And what am I saying? Basically, I want to make I want to give you guys a more nuanced take on what NoFap means to me, what pickup means. I'll briefly mention Looksmaxxing and Black Pill. Somebody was asking about my thoughts on that. NoFap and pickup ultimately is about sexual regulation, sexual mastery, and relationship navigation, relationship mastery. All those things are interconnected. One of the things I'll say is that when you do NoFap, it's very difficult to simultaneously do NoFap but also be someone that goes out a lot, trying to pick up women, dating a lot of girls, going out, doing a lot of game. Because when you're doing when you're doing a lot of game and seduction, you actually spend a lot of time in a state of arousal, whether you know this or not, consciously, or it's just the reality. In my experience, the guys that are the best at NoFap are usually guys that are kind of religious or MGTOW, or like they basically don't really go out much at all. Like they don't really have much of a social life, particularly much of a dating life or seduction life. There are a few individuals that can pull it off. It's very fucking difficult to be able to do a long streak of NoFap, but also have like an engaging and interesting dating life. They kind of cancel each other out because, again, the arousal, you're in a constant state of arousal when you do a lot of day game and stuff like that. There are ways to mitigate that, though. You can sort of cut down the amount of lustful thinking, even though you're out and about doing a lot of game. It's possible. But it's not always easy. It's also about regulating fantasy, not being too much. When you see a girl, don't like look at her all the time and like eye her up and down too much. If you want to, it's hard to pull this off, but yeah, it's about seducing someone, but being more on the spirit, like being focused more on the spiritual side of the equation rather than the physical side. Which is, again, tough to pull off, especially if you're out meeting a lot of different women, because you almost can't be on. You almost can't be. It's difficult to be too much on the spiritual side when you're also meeting a lot of different girls. You're going out a lot. If you're, especially in your early 20s, and you're just learning how to go out and do all that. About the Looksmaxxing, Black Pill. I saw a video recently. I don't know if you guys know RSD Tyler, Owen Cook, Real Social Dynamics, this guy. He kind of disappeared from the scene. He used to be a big dating coach back in like the earlier 2010s, even I think the late 2000s. They spoke about him in the game as well in the famous book. And he did a podcast recently with Sam Hyde. I don't know if you guys know him. Really fucking cool. Channel, Sam Hyde, check him out, SAMHYDE. Really funny, creative kind of character. So Owen Cook was someone that made a lot of money coaching guys, dating and stuff, and he has a lot of unique experience, like, I don't know, thousands of hours of him, like recordings of thousands of hours of him picking up girls and stuff. And he's like a short, pudgy, not very attractive guy, like in the classical sense. He's a redheaded, ginger, chubby kind of guy. And he even says this. And it was very motivating for a lot of guys to see that kind of content when he came out with it. And like a lot of the early pickup content featured infield footage. which is footage where you can actually see people going out and like picking up girls, whether it's during the day, whether it's at night or whatever. And you can kind of see average guys, below average guys, fit guys and unfit guys all getting results. And then you could also see the reality of what it takes and like how they deal with rejection and so on. So it was very motivating content for a lot of guys back in the day. And then there was like this really strict censorship that occurred at one point, and like a fuck ton of videos got deleted around that type of content, specifically infield footage. Something to do with like the identity of the people that these guys were approaching, and there was some weird ethical dilemma and it got censored or something. So even though they were like blurring out the faces of these girls and everything, but what that did was it collectively removed a ton of content. And so these other channels that were talking about Looksmaxxing, the importance of money, Lamborghinis, all this kind of stuff came to the forefront. You know, sometimes when you remove a big chunk of footage, obviously people gravitate towards other footage, right? So it's a very simple dynamic that this is what Owen Cook's theory was anyway, as to why this is. There could be, I've heard more cynical theories about this. It could be a conspiracy. One of the theories I've even had was by making you listen to guys like Andrew Tate, etc., it keeps you locked in the capitalist system of like focusing on making money all the time and like trying to win female validation by your position in the social hierarchy. So it kind of keeps you locked in the system, even though it claims to be like against or counter to the system. So that's just a quirky take. I don't actually believe that. I think Owen Cook is probably more right. And I'm not necessarily criticizing capitalism. I'm not a socialist. So just an interesting thought I had about that. But so what was I saying? So yeah, my thought process is more in line with what Owen Cook is saying overall, which is that you can get results and that ultimately picking up girls and having a sex life and all this kind of stuff is achievable for a lot of guys that are quote unquote below average. But it's easy to forget what it's going to take. You know, you can't be too cynical, especially in the beginning when you're going out and learning this kind of stuff. So I personally avoid anything to do with Looksmaxxing content. I try to avoid the big red pill stuff as well, whether it's Fresh and Fit, etc. Partly because those guys are referring to a very specific dating world, which is like Miami 2020s. That doesn't really represent how things are going in other parts of the world or even other parts of the U.S. And to be honest, a lot of times when I watch that kind of content, I walk away feeling a bit angry at women and the world and everything, and it doesn't really give me the generosity of spirit, you could say, of someone like Zan Perion, for example, or if you've read The Way of the Superior Man by David Data, you'll have a much more spiritual, open, and motivating point of view when you go out. If you read something like that before going out, I think you'll be in a better state of mind than if you read something like, or if you watch something like Fresh and Fit. If you watch something like Fresh and Fit and then go out to pick up girls, you'll probably be a little bit cynical and withdrawn from them when you talk to them. You might even try to neg them or do or say things that kind of puts them down, because in your mind at that point you'll probably be thinking too much about status and comparing your quote-unquote value and things like that, whereas there's actually a lot more dimensions to interactions with women than some of these podcasters and mainstream, if you want to even call it mainstream, but the big manosphere PUA types are currently talking about. There's a lot more nuanced takes than that. And honestly, by definition, if you're listening to anybody who's like really mainstream or like really well known, you're probably not getting the most sophisticated content, because anything that has mass appeal is usually quite watered down, which is what makes most people even be able to understand it. So if you really want to get good at seduction or game or human nature, you have to read broadly, and over time you'll find less and less people that can actually that you can actually relate with, if that makes sense. You'll find yourself reading or watching less and less, again, mainstream stuff or like big content publishing stuff, because you'll just find it to be too watered down, too dumbed down, often using too much emotion, or maybe appealing to the widespread anger of men and stuff, right? Using that anger to kind of promote your message. So that's my take on that. That's why, again, I created this forum. I want guys to exchange information, less absorbing information, more interaction. I think that's what's really important right now. So instead of sitting there and consuming 3 hours of Fresh and Fit, post your fucking question in the forum and then see what other guys have to say. And hopefully we can cultivate a community of guys that are actually well-read. And when I say well-read, I don't mean you read like fucking 2 modern PUA books, because that's the definition of, that's arguably a very poor background. I'm talking, did you read poetry? Have you read romance? Have you read Casanova's autobiographies? Have you read The Art of Love by Ovid? Have you read The Odyssey? Have you read the Bible? Have you read, all these different things? Even the guys that you listen to, do you just listen to Fresh and Fit? Do you also what about David Data? What about Zan Perrione? Have you read books on sexuality, on cultivating the link between sexuality and spirituality? You have guys like Montauk Chia, The Multi-Orgasmic Man is a book he wrote. But guys read just the red pill stuff or the black pill stuff, and they develop this really cynical perspective, which can sometimes sound smart and impress people, because it makes you sound kind of shrewd and like tough when you talk kind of tough about life and women. But ultimately you have a very reductive point of view on all these things. So again, this is what navigating Dionysus is about. It's about constantly challenging your narrative and making it more expansive, more able to handle paradox, more able to handle different dimensions and intimacy and romance and life and relationships. I used to be quite conservative in my thoughts on what made a good woman, etc. You look at like the Bible, you have the whore and Madonna complex, right? You don't have a whole lot of different types of women in the Bible, right? You have kind of the prostitute or the Virgin Mary, right? The most virtuous woman of them all, according to Christian doctrine, and a idol or inspiration for many, many generations of women in Christian cultures, right? So I'm not necessarily knocking that, but what I'm saying is, I used to have more rigid perspectives on this kind of stuff, but now I'm a little bit less critical in some ways of women, of men, because I have experience now. I'm in my 30s now. I've had years and years of experience in the game and all this kind of stuff, relationships, all this. And I think the older you get, if you're being honest with yourself, you become a little bit more diplomatic and a little bit more open to the possibilities and different dynamics people have, and less judgmental, because you realize that life is fucking complicated, and it's not fair to fit everyone into some sort of rigid ideal. So again, this is what the forum is about. It's for guys to hold each other accountable to just expanding their perspective and deepening their understanding of intimacy, relationships, sexuality, and then skillfully approaching those things with nuanced thinking, whether it's like overcoming porn addiction, whether it's finding a girlfriend, whether it's just learning the game in general, or other subjects of how to live a masculine, fruitful, powerful life where you can be your own man. And again, where there isn't, you don't have to be afraid of fitting into the mainstream narrative about this stuff. It's my fucking platform. That's why we're moving it off of YouTube and onto my forum. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy. You can also check out a few essays on there. I have one where I kind of explain in more detail what the whole like ending of Spartan ownership was about and why Navigating Dionysus is the new name. And I definitely count on coming out with more content. Yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this little video. Talk soon.